what's up guys? I am Jerome from the Bonsai Supply and welcome to this week's video. And so in this week's video, we are going to be covering another species in detail, which is the Texas sage. Now the Texas sage is a rather unusual species to use for bonsai. However, we have been experimenting with it in the recent months and we really fell in love with it because it has those naturally smaller leaves, beautiful flowers and that rough bark. So we naturally thought this is a great species to use to create a shohin bonsai or even an accent piece. So now in this week's video, we're going to be covering things such as what time of the year is it best to repot my Texas sage, what kind of fertilizer do I use, how do I propagate it, what type of soil do I use, what type of pests and disease does this tree get, and so much more. So without further ado, let's get right to it. Native to Mexico as well as Texas, the Texas sage is an evergreen shrub that is actually not a true sage, but it is in the mint family, funny enough. Now, the Texas sage can be grown in a variety of hardiness zones from an 8 all the way to an 11. So it has a very wide variety of growing zones, which means that you can either treat it like a temperate tree or like a tropical tree. And you're going to find out a little bit later why that is important, which way you treat it, either like a tropical or like a temperate tree. Now the Texas sage comes in a variety of leaf shapes and sizes as well as colors. So you can find them either with very small leaves or larger leaves, like there's a dwarf variety. Then the leaves, they can either be more on the greener side or more on the gray side. And the flower colors, there's 3 main flower colors, white, pink, and purple. Now I have found that the pink and purple are readily available, but the white ones seem to be more on the rarer side. Maybe I just have looked in the wrong places, but I have not found that one yet, but it does exist. Now I really like the rough bark that the Texas sage develops at a very young age. I also like that it can be very easily propagated. And a plus is also that the leaves come in a variety of shapes, sizes, as well as colors, as do the flowers. And you can very easily create a twiggy tree. The branches stay very fine. So with continuous pruning, you can just make it twiggier and twiggier and twiggier. Now, this is not a species that I would particularly wire, or maybe just wire it once, but then do a clip and grow method because it grows so twiggy. Now it starts the flower cycle in January and it goes all the way into December. Now in the seasonal care, we're going to start out in the spring. And so if you treat it like a temperate tree, you would repot it in the spring. When the buds start to break, you would repot it then, keep it above 40 degrees Fahrenheit, keep it out of wind until it's safe to do so. Now, I would not do any large cuts on a Texas sage, and I would not do any large branch bending because they are a little bit on the brittle side. Now moving into summertime, if you treat it like a tropical tree, you can now go ahead and repot it in the summertime. And the reason why I'm giving you guys this choice, if you treat it like a temperate tree or like a tropical tree, that really depends on where you live. So if you live in a cooler climate, let's say New York or Canada, you would have to treat it like a temperate tree. And if you live in a climate like Florida, you kind of have to treat it like a tropical tree. And if you live in an in-between, like a semi-tropical climate, then you can choose which way you want to treat it. But you cannot treat it one year as a temperate and the next year as a tropical. Kind of you have to be persistent with it and follow that regimen. So in the summertime, if you choose to repot it, if you choose to treat it like a tropical tree, repot it. You can once again trim it and wire it. I do not defoliate my Texas sage because they are in the mint family. I treat them like a I kind of do treat them like a sage or like a rosemary. Like they are fast growers, but they're not particularly strong in terms of when you do a lot to them at the same time. So therefore I do things slowly and I space them out throughout a couple of years. like the repotting, the styling, the trimming. So I treat them a lot softer. Also, we only repot them after the flower cycle is done. So once it has stopped flowering, that's when we would repot it. In the spring, we can repot it before it starts to flower. Now, moving into the fall, there we don't do anything. We can do a little bit of light wiring, a little bit of light trimming, and then in the winter time, we kind of just leave them alone. Unless you want to bend bigger branches, that would be your time to do so. But other than that, I just kind of leave them alone, let them recover from what I've done to them over the year, and just, let them rest throughout the winter time. Now, in terms of propagation, they do propagate very easily from cuttings in the middle of the summer. And the research that I have done suggests that you should propagate them from soft wood cuttings, not from hardwood cuttings. So do that in the summertime. You can also air layer them. If you happen to find a thicker tree, like in the ground, or a thicker shrub, I should say, and you want to air layer a big branch off of that, also do that in the summertime. Now, this is the only downside of the Texas sage. It is a little bit difficult to find them like with a thick trunk. You mainly find them with like a diameter the size of my pinky and nothing thicker than that. So it does take a little while for them to thicken up, but nonetheless, you could still air layer them in the middle of the summer as well. Next up, we're going to talk about the care and maintenance, and we're going to cover topics such as fertilizing, watering, as well as pest and disease. Now, starting off with the fertilizing, I recommend that you use our all-purpose 18410 chemical slow-release fertilizer. That is exactly what you want to use for a species like that. So get it up and moving with that high firepower fertilizer, and we actually fertilize them year-round. Unless we repot them, we take that month off. So if we repot it in the spring, let's say maybe March-ish, I would stop the fertilize, repot it, and then leave it alone. But then in April, I would start to fertilize again. And we also continue to fertilize into the winter time. And we have started to do that with all of our trees. We just fertilize them throughout the year, even when they go to sleep. Because even if you don't see any top growth, the roots still continue to grow. And the tree can actually absorb all of these nutrients that you give it and then save these nutrients and energy for the spring, and then come out with a big bang. You get a lot more growth and a lot more firepower. So that's something that I recommend you continue to do or start doing if you haven't done that already. Now, the Texas sage likes to be grown in full sun and therefore needs a lot of water during the growing season. Even though it is drought tolerant, we still, when it is actively growing, we want to make sure that we don't miss any waterings. And of course, I would recommend that you pair it with our all-purpose bonsai soil mixture, which is made out of pumice, calcined clay, lava, and pine bark. And therefore, you don't have to worry about overwatering it at all. But, keep it well watered when it is actively growing or actively flowering. And that applies throughout the entire year. So if you overwinter it with your tropical trees in a greenhouse and it continues to flower and grow, well, guess what? Continue to water it, continue to fertilize it. If it starts to go dormant, like if you treat it like a temper tree and you keep it with your Japanese maples and it stops growing, then you can also back off the watering a little bit. But just make sure that throughout the winter time, if it stops growing, that you keep the soil just slightly moist on the verge of drying out. But in the middle of the summer, do not let it dry out under any circumstance. Now, for the insect and pests, they don't get a lot of diseases, which is really nice. The only thing that they do get is the occasional mealybug or aphid. But nonetheless, I would just treat it like any of my other trees. And if this is your first time watching one of our videos, this might come as a little bit of a surprise to you. but I like to spray all of my trees on a monthly basis with insecticide to prevent any infestation and just to keep my backyard clean and safe. And that's why I rotate through two different chemicals that I spray on a bi-monthly basis, and therefore I never have to worry about an infestation, which makes my job a lot easier. So this is it for this week's video, and I really hope that you guys enjoyed learning about the Texas sage, and hopefully I was able to, get you excited about picking one up yourself if you don't have one already. Now, if you have any questions, comments, or maybe I forgot to mention something or left something out, please do so and leave those comments down in the comments section. And while you're there, give us a like while you're at it. Now, thank you guys so much for watching, and I'll catch you guys next time.